Welcome to Beneath the Bible, where we're helping you dig deeper and uncover the world beneath the sacred book. Now, Leviathan is a name you've probably heard before. It's a word that is in the public consciousness with perhaps a vague understanding that it comes from the Bible. But what is Leviathan? Well, Leviathan is a totalitarian state with a massive administrative bureaucracy that... Okay, who wrote this? Did Thomas Hobbes write this? Seriously. Okay, we're back. So, what is Leviathan? Well, there's a lot of confusion about this among many readers of the Bible. Depending on who you listen to, it's a crocodile, or a dolphin, or a whale, or a hippopotamus, or a dinosaur, or it's a real creature described hyperbolically, or it's a personification of evil, or it's a personification of Assyria, or you get the idea. There are many ideas out there about what Leviathan is, but archaeology has something to contribute here because Leviathan also appears outside the Bible, and we even have some depictions of it. Let's dig in. Now, the word Leviathan appears just 6 times in the Bible, and it only shows up in poetic passages. In every instance, the word is used as a proper noun, like a name, and not something like a category, generic name, or description. Now, it's possible that Leviathan is also referenced a few more times indirectly, and we'll get to those in a minute. The most famous mention and description of Leviathan is in Job 41. Now, this passage comes near the end of 2 speeches given by God to Job. God speaks out of a whirlwind and contrasts Job's weakness and ineffectuality with the strength and power of God. God talks about the mighty beasts that God has created and ends with a discussion of Leviathan. And we won't go through all of these verses now, but I do want to encourage you to take some time to read that passage on your own. But this isn't the only reference to Leviathan in Job. In Job 3:8, Job is speaking and cursing the day of his birth. And among the curses, he refers to people skilled in rousing up Leviathan. Leviathan is also mentioned in the Psalms, like in Psalm 104, which is a creation narrative. Genesis 1 actually follows the pattern established in Psalm 104, so this psalm represents an older creation tradition than the one in Genesis. Now, this psalm talks about how God made the seas, teeming with creatures beyond number. The ships move along the sea, and in the sea, Leviathan frolics there. In Psalm 74, the psalmist is lamenting the desecration of God's sanctuary. Things are bleak until the psalmist recalls, in one of my favorite lines in the Old Testament, "But God, my King, is from of old," meaning God has reigned as sovereign since the primeval era. The psalmist continues to describe this primeval era by stating, "It was you who split open the sea by your power. You broke the heads of the monster in the waters. It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave it as food to the creatures of the desert." Finally, Isaiah has the last 2 explicit references to Leviathan in the Bible. Both are in Isaiah 27:1. It states, "In that day the Lord will punish with his sword, his fierce, great, and powerful sword, Leviathan the gliding serpent, Leviathan the coiling serpent. He will slay the monster of the sea." So, here we have all 6 references to Leviathan. What do they tell us about this biblical monster? And are these actually the only references to Leviathan in the Bible?
The clearest description of Leviathan is in Job 41. There are references to catching it with a fish hook and tying its tongue with rope. It is untamable, has a temper, has strong limbs, has armored skin or scales. Its mouth is filled with teeth, its nose and eyes can spit out lightning, fire comes from its mouth and smoke comes from its nose. Its neck is powerful and its joints are muscular. No human weapon can pierce it. So the whole point is that Job can neither capture nor tame this beast, but is still under the sovereignty of God. This is the passage that has launched 1,000 speculations as to what Leviathan is. The one that has stuck the best and longest, suggested all the way back in the 1600s, is that this is a crocodile. This interpretation essentially argues that Leviathan is the Hebrew term for a crocodile, and that the author is taking some poetic license in this passage in Job. While this is the most popular interpretation, it doesn't stand up to close scrutiny. The Greek author Herodotus tells us that Egyptians would catch crocodiles with hooks baited with pork, or they would kill a pig on the riverbank to lure the creatures in and then throw mud on their eyes so they could be caught. Also, there was a folk belief in the ancient world that crocodiles didn't have tongues, but Job 41 specifically says that Leviathan does have a tongue. And finally, in the previous chapter, God discusses other animals that are clearly real, and he does so using completely plausible and believable language, so why switch to such hyperbole for a real animal here? All this evidence suggests that Leviathan is not simply equivalent to a crocodile. Also, there's the fire breath and lightning eyes bits. Moreover, equating Leviathan with a crocodile also doesn't stand up to the parallels within the Bible itself. Psalm 104 clearly associates the beast with the sea, where boats travel. Now, boats could traverse rivers like the Nile, but none within Israel. So it seems to say Leviathan travels in the sea, and there aren't saltwater crocodiles in the Mediterranean, now or in antiquity. Psalm 74 also associates Leviathan with the sea, especially the primordial or primeval sea. In that passage, Leviathan is also paralleled with sea monsters and is said to have several heads. Isaiah 27 calls Leviathan a gliding serpent or a coiling serpent and the monster of the sea. The biblical material clearly depicts Leviathan as more serpent-like than crocodilian, like a giant sea serpent that lives in the deep open seas. Now, this is not a crocodile or any other merely natural creature. Instead, it is paralleled with sea monsters and what we would call dragons. The Bible actually has several terms for dragons. Tanim simply means dragons or sea monsters. Rahab is a name for a sea monster. And it's not clear if Rahab is a distinct creature or it may even just be another name for Leviathan. It may just be the name that later authors, primarily post-exilic authors, used for Leviathan. And even when Rahab, Leviathan, or Tanim aren't mentioned by name, places like Amos 9:3 seem to allude to them. Now, these dragons seem to live in the deep waters and roam the seas. They're associated with chaos, and especially the chaotic waters present at the beginning of time. They appear in accounts that recall the sea myth or chaos conf, where the ordering god defeats the chaotic waters and orders the world. Well, we don't have a lot of description of what Leviathan is like other than serpentine and the poetic description in Job. Psalm 74 indicates that it has more than one head, but in general, the Israelite authors don't get into the details of what their monsters looked like. But lucky for us, Leviathan does appear in extra biblical texts and is even depicted in art. These depictions all recall elements of the sea myth, places where gods, particularly storm gods, defeat chaotic sea dragons. We've got a whole video on the sea myth that you can check out here. But for now, let's explore Leviathan outside the Bible. Leviathan first appears in texts outside the Bible in the Baal cycle from Ugarit. In those texts, we see the triconsonantal root LTN, likely vocalized Litanu, which shares an etymology with Leviathan. Both Leviathan and Litanu are either derived from a common root meaning the twisting one or the wreath-like or circular one, which would point to a serpentine twisting shape. In the Baal cycle, Litanu is called variously the fugitive serpent, wriggling serpent, and even mighty one with 7 heads. And these descriptions have parallels with Isaiah 27, Job 26, and Psalm 74. We don't just see 7-headed sea serpents in the Baal cycle. We see them in texts going back to the Sumerian world. In the mythic story, The Return of Ninurta to Nippur, the warrior god Ninurta boasts about his conquering journey to the mountains, a land beyond the ordered world, before he returns to his temple at Nippur to manifest his authority and kingship. Among the creatures he is said to have slayed is the Mushmachu, which many identify as a 7-headed serpent. Now, these serpents are different from other mythic serpents like the Ouroboros, like the one seen here on this Kuduru. The 7-headed sea dragon from Mesopotamia, which again appears from the Sumerian period into the Iron Age, is likely what inspired the Greek myth of Heracles and the Hydra. Both the imagery and the text of fighting a 7-headed serpent go all the way back to the Sumerian period. This drawing of a fragmentary impression of a seal, which dates back to the early dynastic III period, shows several scorpions, but also a hero, who doesn't appear to be divine, holding 2 severed heads and facing a now 5-headed serpent. He's 28% of the way there to severing all of its heads. This imagery continued into the Akkadian period, where we find this seal. This modern impression of a seal recovered from the site of Tel Asmar, or ancient Eshnunna, shows 2 gods fighting a 7-headed monster. The dominant deity in the scene is spearing the monster, apparently with some success, as 4 of the 7 heads appear to be dead or dying. He has an assistant working on the other side who is, no doubt, being helpful. The beast itself has its 7 heads, but also 4 legs, a long body, and what appear to be flames coming off of it. Now, this scene developed into a much more common image, some of which we've shown on this channel before, of a deity often with attributes of the storm god standing on or fighting a serpent-like dragon. This imagery even crosses cultures from the Semitic-speaking world of Syria, Palestine, and Mesopotamia into Egypt. This transition seems especially apparent in the Second Intermediate period of Egypt, a time when the so-called Hyksos or foreign pharaohs ruled Lower Egypt. These Hyksos were people of Asiatic origin and brought their Syro-Palestinian culture with them, which was often expressed in an Egyptianizing manner. This image of a storm god fighting a sea serpent took an interesting pattern in the Middle and Late Bronze Age after the Hyksos introduced it. For the Hyksos, the storm god was the head of their pantheon, and so it was he who fought the chaotic sea dragon. In Egypt, Horus, associated with the sun and falcon, was among their most important deities. Sobek, a crocodile-headed god, came to be associated with the sea dragon in this mythic pattern. So a common design on scarabs, which post-date the Hyksos period, depict a falcon opposing a crocodile. This is a highly stylized and Egyptianized way of depicting the destruction of the sea dragon. So in this sense, and only this sense, Leviathan actually is a crocodile, but only after a lot of earlier development before this imagery came into contact with Egypt.
Now, hopefully this video has helped you gain a better understanding of Leviathan, its origins, influences, and significance within and outside the Bible. We've tried to dispel some common explanations and give you the real history behind this fascinating creature. But you may be left wondering, how does knowing this help me read the Bible? After all, that's our goal here, right? Well, like so many things that we explore on this channel, seeing the history behind Leviathan helps us see how the Israelites were very much situated in their wider world and how their worldview was influenced by the people groups around them. And we don't see a detailed explanation of Leviathan as a gigantic seven-headed serpent in the Bible, but it wouldn't have been necessary because the original audience would have known what Leviathan was thought to be already. However, I think the enduring significance of Leviathan in the Bible is in how differently the Bible portrays this creature compared to other ancient Near Eastern mythology. Job 41 makes it clear that Leviathan is a great and powerful beast, impossible for any human to tame. The queries God poses to Job about this creature make it clear that while Job could never hope to hook Leviathan, to pierce its scaly skin, to make it his pet, these tasks are no problem at all for God. Rather than being a fearsome creature that must be slain to bring order to the world, Leviathan is simply another of the wondrous creatures God has made, albeit on a scale unlike any other. Psalm 104 says that God made Leviathan to play in the sea, not to rule over it. God's absolute sovereignty over all of creation, even those mythical beasts beyond human comprehension, is used as a poetic extension of the mastery God has over the universe and over everyday life. In the face of such unrivaled authority, perhaps we can only respond as Job did. I know that you can do all things, and that no plan is impossible for you. Who is this who conceals advice without knowledge? Therefore I have declared that which I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I do not know. Please listen and I will speak. I will ask you and you instruct me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I retract and I repent, sitting on dust and ashes. Thanks for joining us for this Beneath the Bible video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to give this video a like and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. You can also follow us on social media, on Twitter and Facebook at Beneath the Bible. If you learned something new today, take a minute to share this video with your friends. And until next time, keep digging.